episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. I am Danielle Hargenrader, and today I'm really excited to bring you another awesome diabetes dominator. Laura G, am I saying that right? Okay. Has lived with type 1 diabetes since she was 7 years old for 29 years. And as an adolescent, she battled to keep her blood sugars under control. Today, Laura and her husband, Rob, who is also a T1D, and we're going to talk about that more in the interview, are advocates for health and professional speakers, helping other diabetics see what is possible. So Laura, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So as we normally do here, we would love to hear more about you, get to know you and your diabetes story. So if you would kind of walk us down the path that you traveled, starting at diagnosis and then bring us up to current times.
Sure. My path of diabetes has been, bumpy. I wouldn't say anyone's path is perfect. There's no such thing as perfect in diabetes. But, I was 7 years old. It was summertime. My family was going through a really stressful time. I had two aunts that had cancer. One of them had just passed away. The other one was, not doing so well either. And here I was, supposed to be this happy little active child. And I was so skinny. There's pictures of me that I remember seeing where I'm just like a little skeleton. I'm skinny. I'm just not the way a little kid should be. I didn't have the energy to, run around the backyard with my sister like I did just a few months ago. And, my parents started to notice this. And my dad, I remember him saying, I was skinny as a kid too, but there were other things. There was, this little kid always having to go to the bathroom. This little kid so thirsty. My mom had been doing some pickles. She was making pickles, and in the fridge we had a vinegar solution and all this stuff. And I remember being so thirsty one day that I actually took that vinegar solution, drank it, and before I knew what I was doing, I was just so numb to everything. I was so thirsty. Definitely I spit it out, but gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. So, my mom started to get worried after this incident, and mom being mom, she puts me in the car and, she just goes and does a glucose test stick. She has had a few family members have diabetes. And so she decided to test my urine, and sure enough, she saw some sugar there. And, not to self-diagnose, of course, we went to our doctor, and wow, my blood sugar was 3 times normal. I was diabetic. I waited, at the time, there weren't very many beds in my local hospital to get in. So we waited, about a week. On that final morning, I actually didn't wake up. I had started to go into a diabetic coma. My dad, he used to drive stock cars, and that morning he bammed through a construction zone with his little kid in the back seat. We lived in the middle of nowhere, the complete boonies, and got me to the hospital. And that is when I had my very first day of feeling what it's like to start knowing what it's like to have a blood sugar start to come down. I mean, it takes a while, but after that, growing up with diabetes wasn't easy. I have one younger sister, and she loves candy. And telling a 7-year-old kid with a little sister who loves candy, you've got to watch what you're eating, that was rough. I went through, grew up, had a great life. The one thing about me, though, was I never doubted myself. I knew that even though I was going through some rocky times, gosh, you want to talk about something really rocky? Let's talk about hormones. Puberty and diabetes, that was a fun time. But I had a great family support, great medical team support. We got through it. I became an adult. I was so fascinated with diabetes and health and just life in general that I wanted to enter the medical community. So I became a veterinary technician. My parents nearly had a heart attack when I went away to college. Gosh, a diabetic at college, that's interesting. But here I am today, and there's been a few life happenings in recent years that have really changed my diabetes, have really changed my life. And I'll definitely tap into those in the next few minutes with you.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's a great story. And you said mentioned about, I have a very similar, hormones and diabetes did not mix well for me either. So I totally understand that. And but now they have, and I don't know if it was around back then. I think it's fairly new, although don't quote me on this. But now they have, great resources like the College Diabetes Network, where they'll hook you up with other people, in your area that have diabetes, and there's so many more great resources because I think I was diagnosed in 1991, and I'm about 25 years ago, so you're even a little before that. We didn't have the internet. That wasn't even a thing, and I'm sure, it was the same because you grew up in Canada, that wasn't a resource, the diabetes online community. So, yeah, I'm very grateful for technological advances and everything else that we have going on today. So why don't you, this is for me one of the most interesting stories ever, and certainly the first time I've been introduced to it, but tell us about you and your husband and the diabetes story.
Well, as I mentioned, I went away to college. I grew up. I also, believe it or not, my poor protective parents nearly freaked when I left home. And I started working in research in London, Ontario, Canada. And there I met this guy named Rob, and I thought he was pretty cute. Let's just say he was pretty cute. And it was, I guess, 2 years into, us dating. He was stressed out, like, beyond belief. He was working on his PhD at the time, and I didn't know whether that was his problem or whether I was on the verge of getting dumped. You know how you get kind of insecure about that stuff when you're dating? So, I mean, he was just unbelievably grumpy. He was, I remember the night he was over at my apartment. We were playing board games. I'm a total geek.
Yeah, and me too. I'm a geek too, self-proclaimed.
And he just, he kept having to disturb our board game. He kept running to the bathroom. He'd also had like 3 glasses of water that night. And, that's when things started to, I was like, wait a second, what the heck is going on here?
Don't worry about your phone. I always tell people all the time, I'm like, this is a real life interview. There's no like camera crew or anything. Like, I'm sitting in my basement and you're sitting in your house. I've had doorbells ring. I've had kids run through. I've had cats run through. So don't worry about your phone.
I think it's my mom. Hi, Mom. But anyway, he had all these signs that I was very familiar with. So just, for fun.
Yeah.
I said, Rob, let's test your blood sugar. And, until that moment, I didn't know how significantly our relationship, our life would change. That was the moment when our worlds just kind of collided. I tested his blood sugar. It was through the roof. It was so high. And he looked at me and I looked at him and I'm like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, well, let's take a trip to the ER. I mean, it was the weekend. I wasn't going to make him wait till Monday. Good grief, no way. I mean, I know the seriousness. So show up at the ER and the rest is history. The next day he got his very first dose of insulin, confirmed diabetic, met with his nutritionist, practitioner. And I'll never forget the moment. He looks at me and he's like, did you give it to me?
Oh, it's actually funny because this is like long before I've been married for, coming up in 2016 will be 9 years, but I have dated guys in the past where, and I mean, truly, the thing about diabetes is that a lot of people just don't know anything about it. They hear things in the media or some random incorrect information that they'll put on some TV show, or even on the news, they'll say something wrong. So I have had guys more than one time ask me if they could catch it. And I mean, like, but honestly, truthfully speaking, if you don't know anything about a disease, like, back then I was like, you're an idiot. Like, I wanted to like smack them. But now thinking about it, like back then, it's like, if they didn't know, that's kind of a valid question. Although I'm sure your husband realized that you didn't go. I hope he realized that you didn't give it to him.
Well, what's really funny is my husband's really smart. He's a science guy. He's super smart. But when we first met, he really didn't know what diabetes was. Like, he actually, and this is very interesting to talk about. A lot of diabetics grow up feeling kind of ashamed and embarrassed. There's no need to be ashamed or embarrassed. But at that point in my life, I was this insecure female. I didn't want people to think of me as someone different. So I went through a phase in my life where I really tried to hide it. And that was dangerous. Rob found out I was diabetic after knowing me for a couple weeks. He goes to throw something in the trash and looks under my sink and I've got this big bucket of needles. And he comes in the living room and he's like, are you on drugs?
Oh, you mean everybody doesn't have a big bucket of needles under their sink? I thought that was just totally normal.
So, I mean, he had a lot to learn, and, you know, looking back, he has said he's pretty grateful because it made the transition into diabetes a lot easier. And that's when I really started to realize that the more awareness we can have out there about diabetes, what it is, how to control it, stuff like that, makes all of the other people in our spheres a little bit more aware, just in case they should ever develop it. Because we really can save our lives and prevent complications just by paying attention.
I totally agree. And I'm a big advocate in general, but I'm an advocate of education, because that's the thing. I think it's easy for a lot of people. And I used to be this person. I was a very angry teenager. I was a very overweight, diabetes out of control. And I get angry when people would say things that were not right, which was wrong information. But I've come to the point now where I realize that anger and reacting in that way doesn't actually help anything get better. But when we kind of go back to our place of education and saying, look, like, people don't know about this disease and we do know about it. So we're in this position where we have this opportunity to spread this knowledge. And whether or not the person actually kind of absorbs that knowledge, you know, but I think like 9 times out of 10, now that person knows something that they didn't know before. And now they might possibly spread that knowledge to somebody else, which is exactly what you said. The more we spread the knowledge, the more likely it is that we're going to have, you know, over time, less and less misinformation and more kind of understanding of the fact that, you know, diabetes is not, you know, contagious and not, you know, caused 100% by eating sugar and all this other stuff that people are just like, oh, you know, have this candy bar and now you have diabetes. Like, that's people, and that's the thing, like, it's a joke to a lot of people, but a lot of people, like, that's what they believe because that's what they see on TV, and it's just this, it damages our whole community. And it's, yeah, we need to educate. So we need to take every opportunity to educate versus getting angry, even though I know sometimes it's really easy to get angry.
Exactly. Yeah, totally normal. So one thing all of us diabetics can relate on is the feelings associated with the condition. It's a very emotional condition, but
it's yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just so empowering when you can take hold of it.
Yeah, and it's emotional and it's personal. That's why I understand how, especially I find the more I interact with people with diabetes, I find it sometimes can be even more emotional for parents of children with diabetes to get that kind of get your back up, like, don't talk about my child that way and that kind of thing. And that's also very understandable because, like we said, it's like all you want to do is protect your child and make sure that they're not, you know, but I think that overall, probably the best way that we can protect, you know, our fellow people with diabetes is just to, like we talked about, is just spread that education in a kind way. And of course, there's going to be fools out there that aren't going to latch onto it, but that's, you know, people are people, whether it comes to diabetes or not. So you just got to try to, you know, stick within those confines of being kind, spreading knowledge, and hoping that that knowledge continues to spread.
Precisely.
Yeah, so I was going to say, tell me a little bit more about, so I know you advocate for diabetes on just a little bit even further than your own life. So tell me a little bit about what you do, speaking and things like that, and how you got into that.
It's been, how I got into all this has been a very twisted way that I totally would never have expected. I was a very shy girl. I never talked to anyone. I was the girl that would much rather be standing against the wall at school than out there playing, you know, volleyball or something. This all sort of came to be because I mentioned that there's cancer in my family. So taking a step back real quick here, my mom was diagnosed with cancer about 5-6 years ago. And that was awful because I had to watch many of her brothers and sisters battle through it. Most of them didn't survive. She's one of 9, and having, you know, very few of them left after going through cancer was awful. And there's my mom, and she gets it. And, you know, today we're presented with so many more opportunities of knowledge and things like this because of research in medicine. And so my mom had the opportunity to go for some genetic testing to see, you've probably heard of Angelina Jolie and the BRCA testing and things like that. So my mom went, and she came back positive for the BRCA2 gene mutation. It's a known mutation that increases your risk of cancer. So yay, that's great. We actually have a reason why everybody in her family is getting cancer. But then it kind of focused on my sister and I. Being born of someone with that mutation, we had a 50% risk of having the mutation as well. So on top of diabetes, I'm a proud BRCA2 mutation girl. Oh. So in my lifetime, I have a very high chance of getting cancer. My sister also does. She's also positive. So great. All the women in my family have it, it seems. I decided to undergo a bilateral prophylactic mastectomy. So here I am. Yay, I'm talking about my boobs now.
Hey, I mean, that's the thing, though. The fact that we have this ability to find these genetic mutations ahead of time, I think that's a huge thing here. And I think talking about it out loud, you know, just like Angelina Jolie did, it's like it gives people this sense of I'm not alone, which I think is huge in all disease communities, all sorts. You know, you always feel like you're the only one. And B, it kind of gives other people permission to explore their own situations. Because, I mean, I don't have that kind of cancer background, but my aunt passed away from a combination of liver and colon cancer. My uncle passed away of liver cancer. So I have lots of cancer in my family from both sides as well, but not, so far, no breast cancer. But I mean, hey, it makes me think maybe I should go get tested. And this isn't even something that, I mean, even though I know of the cancer that exists, but then I hear about it from someone else. And I also know that people who have autoimmune diseases are also kind of more prone to getting other situations that go awry in the body. So yeah, I'm grateful that you're talking about this. So thank you for sharing, for sure.
It's the whole awareness thing. So I underwent the surgeries so that I could, reduce my risk.
Sure.
I mean, I've got diabetes. I've got this gene mutation. I just want to have a really, really good life. Mm-hmm. So it kind of hit me. I was laying in bed after my final reconstructive surgery, and here we are back to my husband again, but he made a big mistake. It's kind of fateful, actually, but he hands me his laptop and says, you can play around. I'll be back. I'm just going to go down to the cafeteria and get a drink. When he comes back, he looked at me and he's like, what are you smirking about, Laura? And I said, Rob, I just signed us up to run a 5K. We had never run before. We weren't fit people. We were academics. We went, I don't know, we just were not fit people. And there I am, probably under the influence of some really great drugs. I signed us up for a 5K, which was 10 days away.
Oh, 10 days away. Okay. I was going to say, I went from, not fit to fit, but I didn't go to a 5K in 10 days. So that's a bit extreme.
Very extreme. And in those 10 days, we really didn't do so well. We had to walk. We had to really just, try our best. And here I was still all boob bandaged up. And during that time, I started to become very aware and very empowered. And I found I was talking to more people. I completed the 5K. We did it. Of course, we had low blood sugars during training. And of course, we were struggling with the diabetes, the recovery and everything. But the more I talked to people, the more I realized people wanted to talk about these sorts of topics. They just really hadn't. And when it started to open up this great sphere of people being interested in health and fitness, people struggling with their diabetes, people struggling with fear. I mean, the fear of the unknown and the fear of knowing whether you can do something cripples people.
Absolutely.
So from that moment, I just started talking, whether it was to the lady in line at the grocery store or people at work, or wow, the first time I stood on stage and actually told my story. Afterward, the number of people that came up and said, Laura, I know how you feel. That's how it all started. And today I talk publicly, I speak publicly, and I also coach others. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a personal trainer, but I use my experiences. And what I've learned over time is people don't necessarily need an expert. They just need somebody there in their corner supporting and listening. Because quite often, as we're trying to make healthy life decisions or lifestyle changes, the people that are kind of closest to us don't always support us.
Yeah, I think that's huge. You say so many good things you brought up there, but I think that's very true. Is it's great. I'm a big fan of hiring people that have walked the path that you want to walk so that you can help. I mean, I have coaches, I have mentors, but the thing is that I think experience more than anything can be the best. As long as you're willing to learn valuable lessons from the experience. Certainly we can have experiences and not learn anything from them. That depends on the person, of course. But as long as you have those lessons and you've come out on the other end, which I have a lot of experiential living as well, I totally agree. Sometimes you just need somebody to hold you accountable. Sometimes you just need someone to say, I believe you can do this. Not only do I believe you can do this, I know you can because I did it. So if it's possible, then you can do this too. And also you kind of have to have someone that says, look, this is the path I took. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not the exact same path that you took, but maybe it's a blueprint that you can pick and choose what part of that blueprint works for you. And you can make up your own path along the way as well. But it helps to have somebody who's already kind of done that. And I totally agree. Yeah. I got my degree in nutrition science because I needed to get myself out of a health rut because I was always a nerd. I was a straight A student. I knew I could always depend on my brain, but I certainly didn't feel like I could depend on my body until I was in my mid-20s, and I'm 33 now. So, I mean, it's not like, for like 8 years, I feel fit and strong, but for the majority of my life, I totally didn't. And I think that's excellent. And,
are we related?
I feel that way about a lot of people I meet in the diabetes community too. I've talked about this a lot. It's like when you meet somebody that has diabetes, even if you're not necessarily aligned with everything, it's like you get past that like awkward getting to know you phase, and it's just like, oh yeah, we're best friends because we have diabetes. Like that's just
common ground.
Yeah,
and that's one thing. I believe you found this as well. The diabetic community is so ready to start talking. I have a really good following on Instagram, as do you. And, it's just nice to have, to hashtag T1D or something like that and have all these other diabetics start commenting and, just bond with each other. So it's a cool common ground to have. I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, and actually I'm kind of like I'm a big fan of like picking one platform and getting good at it. And I know like I'm old and I probably should get on Instagram. I do Twitter and I do Facebook and I do YouTube. And I know I need to get on Instagram because I know like everybody's on Instagram but I'm like afraid to start venturing into it. But the whole point of that is that it doesn't matter where you are on social media. There are people with diabetes on there that are, like you said, ready to talk, ready to share. And I actually had a conversation with somebody about this recently, about people in the diabetes community who want to feel that support, that kind of brotherly, sisterly love and support of like the other people, but they're not really ready to participate. And someone asked me what I thought would be a good idea for that. And I said that to be a lurker. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but it's like, log into these groups, join a Facebook group, follow people on Twitter and just read what they're saying. You don't necessarily have to jump in right away, but I think that you can get so much value from just reading about what other people are doing, even going on 2Diabetes and 2diabetes.org and jumping into a forum. Just because you're in the chat forum doesn't mean you have to chat. You can just lurk. We call it lurkers, but that's not a negative thing. It's just that you're kind of like hiding in the background. You're not really ready to jump out in the middle yet. And that's totally fine, but you can get so much value from just seeing that other people are going through the same issues that you are. So you don't have to jump in.
Yeah, right away. You're so alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to say, what else, if I can ask you a little bit about, what, I imagine that when your husband got diagnosed that he had like a really awesome learning curve because he already had so much experience with living with you. But I mean, how have you found personally, like what's it like to be married to someone? Because I know a couple other people who are couples who have diabetes, but I never really had an in-depth conversation. So what's your experience with that? Just from someone who's happily married for almost 9 years, I can't imagine my husband having diabetes. I'd probably like freak out. So what's your experience with that?
No, this will probably come out totally wrong, but it was so funny being married to another diabetic. Like I think we say things to each other just to tick each other off sometimes.
Yeah, that's marriage.
Oh. One of the things is, this drives me nuts. And I know kids will relate with this with their parents, but I'll test my blood sugar and he'll be like lurking and I'm like,
what?
Like don't. And so, you know, there's this thing, diabetic it. And so whenever we break a rule or cross that boundary, we just yell at the other person, diabetic it. However, it's also really great. It's that support. For example, Rob and I, we run really long distances. We've run some marathons. We've run one ultra marathon. And just being able to run alongside with somebody that can sense things before you do. We both wear continuous glucose monitors. But, you know, Rob, he's kind of like one of those airport dogs. He can sense like from a mile away. And how Rob knows that my blood sugar might be starting to go is when I stop talking. So
interesting.
Yeah, so just having somebody alongside you during those long, long runs that knows. And yeah, I'll admit, I fully talk the entire length of the marathon. And if for a brief period of time I stop talking, he knows it's time to eat.
Wow. I was going to say, I mean, the farthest, you know, I've ever run is a 5K. And that's, even for me, it's like, I want to be more into running, and I'll start and stop with the training, but I don't want to talk to anybody while I'm running. And sometimes I run with my husband, and I'll just listen to my headphones and he'll listen to his, and it's nice that we're together. But it's just like, so it's just so interesting to see how everybody has their own thing. And, you know, I always wear my Dexcom, and, you know, you guys wear yours, and it's great to have it, but to have a husband that knows, my husband knows when I'm low, cause I'll just be like cranky. He'll be like, is your blood sugar low? I'm like, don't ask me that.
Is the word low a bad word? Like,
no, it's not really. I'm just like, even though I don't really get mad. Like, my husband, you know, he's very supportive. Like, he didn't know anything about diabetes when we first met either. Actually, he's ex-military. He was in the Army for 8 years, and he just had these preconceived notions about what diabetes was. So he was actually hesitant until we really got to know each other to even date me exclusively, because our favorite thing to do is travel the world. We travel all the time. And he thought that, you know, having diabetes was going to be like, you know, I'd be in the hospital all the time, and I was going to be, you know, I wouldn't be able to like leave the country, or like, he just had all these preconceived notions from the misinformation he had received up until that point about what diabetes was. But now he's just like, you have diabetes and you're awesome, and there's nothing that you can't do. And, you know, he's super supportive, and anything I need, you know, he'll go get me a juice box, or, you know, he's my right-hand man, and, you know, he'll support me in whatever I want to do. So I'm lucky with that as well. I mean, we don't all get that lucky, I'm sure, you know. So as I always do towards the end here, I would like to ask you what you have found, since you've obviously been living with diabetes for quite some time now, 29 years. What have you found through all of your ups and downs to be your top 3 tips for thriving with diabetes?
I guess my top 3 tips for thriving with diabetes, the first would be consider what you eat. You know, I don't believe in diets. I don't believe in, you know, being totally like perfect.
No.
I believe in every time I eat something, you know, having sort of an athlete mentality and thinking, what will this do for me? And when I ask myself that, it's so simple to, you know, leave those sugars on the table, even though they look really good. If I ask myself, what will it do for me? Wow. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's just,
I have a similar thing that I ask myself, and is this cleansing me or is this clogging me? And I know that might sound funny or weird, and I've actually picked that up probably at a seminar throughout my life. But it is a thing that I'll be like, is this going to cleanse me or is this going to clog me? And I have like the idea of being clogged just feels bad, and it creates this like aversion, even though you want the food, it looks good, like you said. But no, I totally agree with that.
I love that. Clog. Oh gosh. I can't wait till my next buffet. The other thing, I guess my second tip is to develop an active life. When there are so many benefits, I know that people start exercising quite often, you know, to drop 10 pounds, but really that is just a number. Who cares? The benefits for whether you're a diabetic or, you know, someone without diabetes, first thing that happens is, wow, you get a rocking mood. I find if I don't get my morning workout in, I'm not a smiley Laura. there's just so many benefits. And I find as a diabetic, it's so important too, because instead of having blood sugars that, you know, might be a little bit more like the Rocky Mountains, exercise really just helps round everything out. The metabolism, just everything. It's just so nice. And prolong our lives too.
Yeah, absolutely. So totally agree. I was going to say, everybody who probably listens to me all the time knows that I don't like to preach, but you know, exercise is everything. And I always tell people, it's like, you don't have to do an hour. You get out and walk for 10 minutes, and that is going to have an effect on your blood sugar. I always talk about the Big Blue test from Diabetes Hands Foundation. Their Big Blue test, which is you entering your blood sugar before and after you work out. It's 14 minutes that they want to know. It's 14 stinking minutes. Nobody doesn't have 14 minutes, and just like you said, mood is everything, but it's also going to put you in a better mood later when your blood sugars aren't doing this so much. I mean, I'm not saying it's not going to do that ever, but it's going to be less often. So totally, absolutely.
Just physical activity. I mean, it's just awesome. I'm having a great diabetic life, and I attribute a lot of that to my active life. Nothing beats it. And I guess my third tip is mindset. A lot of time now on social media platforms, I come at my diabetes and my life with my handle, which is No Excuses Laura.
Nice.
And that's my little nickname. And I find that when you have a no excuse attitude, anything is possible. I find a lot of times people give up on themselves before they even try. A lot of times I will speak with people and they say, oh, I wish one day I could have, you know, such good diabetes control as you. Well, I'm not perfect, but I try really hard. A lot of people have never written down and tracked and tried to look for trends with their blood sugars. You know, if you want to have a healthy, good feeling, like great life, be accountable for your diabetes and don't let it control you. Develop a no excuses attitude. If you want to get back on track, look at what you're eating, look at your activity, write it down, look for trends, approach everything with a no excuse attitude, and you are going to be, over that hump and onto a better life.
Totally agree. And you said so many things there, but I'm trying to summarize it up as quick as possible. But I have that same thing where I find, I coach people a lot and they have this fear of failure, and that's normal. That's a human experience to be afraid of failing. But I find that for me, it's like, I would rather fail epically than to not try at all. I would rather smash my face into the ground than just sit there and wait and wish. Like, to me, that's the failure. To me, is the not trying. And I mean, I call it a failing forward, because like I'll fail forward, but I don't want to stay stagnant or in the same place, because like from the time humans were, whatever you believe in, crawling out of the ocean onto the land, like we're always trying to be better. And you said the other thing too is you can't manage what you don't measure. So if you're not tracking your food, if you're not tracking, your blood sugars, and with the tools that we have today, I'm talking about MyFitnessPal, like online trackers. I mean, literally, most of our blood sugar machines, whether it's a glucometer or Dexcom, plug into a computer and give us readouts. It's not like we even have to log half the time. They've made it almost foolproof for us to do this. So it's actually goes to my number one thing that I teach, which is our power of choice. That's the only thing we actually have control of in life. You have no control over anything else except for what you choose to do, each one of us. And that's why I call choice a superpower, because it's this huge superpower that everyone has, but it's like a take it for granted thing. It's like, like getting out of bed every morning, that's a choice. Brushing your teeth, that's a choice. Running a 5K is a choice, and eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's is a choice. These are all choices, and we have to see that as a power versus just this random thing, because that's the only thing we can control is what we choose. So you said so many good things. So before we kind of wrap it up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience about Laura's diabetic life?
Not really. I just, the big message for me, for people that I would love other diabetics to hear is, don't give up on yourself. It doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It doesn't matter what you did 10 days ago. It doesn't matter what you did when you got up this morning. But like you said, the power of choice, you can control your life starting right now. It's just unbelievable what can happen when you try. This year I was a 2015 Medtronic Global Hero, and that's one of 25 long distance runners in the world who have benefited from medical technology. And so I was squirting my insulin pump, and on the team this year, there were a whole bunch of us diabetics with our insulin pumps. And the common ground between every single one of them was that they failed a lot throughout their diabetes. And just like what you said, they failed forward, but they didn't give up. And even after the marathon, we were all sitting around celebrating. We were asking each other, okay, well, how did you manage your blood sugar? How did you do yours? And, well, you know, we're all continuing to learn. So learning and education allows us to understand the choices we have. So grateful to share with everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. I'm grateful to have had you. I totally agree. I will always label myself as a lifelong learner. I don't care how much I learn or how much I know. I know that there's still going to be so much information that I'll just never have the chance to know, because unfortunately our time here is limited. So yeah, never put on that cap of, oh, I already know everything. So that's never going to happen. So as I always do, I'm going to get Laura's contact information, her handles on Instagram and on any other way she wants you to be able to follow her. So I'll post that under the blog and under the YouTube video so you can get in contact with her. And other than that, thank you so much for joining us, Laura. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So as usual, we will catch you on the next episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Take care.